Did you know that research shows 91% of elderly people don't survive beyond 8 months after exhibiting specific behavioral changes that most families completely miss? Today, I'll reveal the 5 critical behavioral shifts that medical professionals have identified as the strongest predictors of mortality in seniors. Knowledge that could help you recognize these changes early and potentially extend quality time with your loved ones. The 5th behavioral shift is so commonly dismissed as normal aging that even healthcare providers often overlook it, yet it's the most reliable predictor, according to geriatric specialists at major medical centers. Janet from Wisconsin noticed her 82-year-old father becoming increasingly irritable and withdrawn over several weeks, but attributed it to winter blues. 8 months later, she realized these weren't personality changes, but warning signs that could have prompted earlier medical intervention and better end-of-life planning. Behavioral shift 1: sudden personality changes and increased irritability. When a gentle person becomes easily agitated or a social person becomes hostile without obvious cause, their brain is sending you a critical message about internal changes happening within their body. Johns Hopkins geriatric psychiatrists report that sudden personality changes often indicate decreased oxygen flow to the brain or early organ dysfunction, affecting brain chemistry and neurotransmitter production. These changes aren't the gradual personality shifts that can happen over years, but rather dramatic alterations in temperament that develop over weeks or months. The brain requires consistent oxygen and nutrient delivery to maintain stable mood regulation, and when circulation becomes compromised, personality changes are often among the first noticeable symptoms. Medical research from Harvard Medical School demonstrates that personality changes in elderly individuals frequently precede other obvious health decline symptoms by several months, making them valuable early warning indicators. The changes typically involve increased irritability toward family members, sudden intolerance for noise or activity that never bothered them before, or uncharacteristic anger responses to minor frustrations. These aren't temporary mood swings related to specific events, but persistent alterations in their fundamental approach to daily interactions and relationships with people they've known and loved for decades. Thomas from Arizona went from being patient with his grandchildren to snapping at them for minor noise within just 3 weeks. His family initially thought he was having a bad month, but medical evaluation revealed early signs of cardiovascular changes affecting brain function. The personality changes were actually the first indication that his body was beginning to struggle with maintaining proper circulation to support normal brain chemistry and emotional regulation. Understanding the medical basis for these changes helps families respond appropriately rather than taking the behavioral changes personally or dismissing them as character flaws. When organs begin functioning less efficiently, the brain often shows the effects first through alterations in mood, judgment, and emotional control. Ignoring personality changes means missing early signs of medical conditions that could be managed to improve comfort and potentially slow progression. Document specific personality changes with dates, noting exactly what behaviors have changed and how dramatically. Then discuss these observations immediately with their healthcare provider for proper evaluation. Don't dismiss mood changes as normal aging or character deterioration. Track these patterns starting today and seek professional guidance. Behavioral shift. 2. Loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities. Have they stopped doing things that once brought them joy, even simple pleasures they've enjoyed consistently for years or decades? Mayo Clinic studies show that sudden loss of interest in hobbies and activities often precedes significant health decline by 4 to 8 months, as the body begins conserving energy for essential functions rather than recreational pursuits. This isn't gradual reduction in activity due to physical limitations, but rather complete abandonment of interests that previously provided satisfaction and meaning. The brain's reward systems begin functioning differently when the body is preparing for major health transitions, making activities that once felt rewarding now seem pointless or exhausting. This behavioral shift differs significantly from normal aging adjustments, where people might modify how they pursue interests due to physical changes. End-of-life activity withdrawal involves losing all motivation for hobbies, crafts, reading, or social activities that previously brought genuine pleasure and engagement. The person may express that they don't see the point anymore, or that activities they once loved now feel like too much effort, even when physical capability remains intact. This represents a fundamental change in how the brain processes reward and motivation, rather than simply physical inability to participate. Ruth from Nevada stopped tending her beloved garden after 30 years of daily care, claiming she just didn't see the point in planting flowers anymore. Her physical ability to garden remained unchanged, but her emotional connection to the activity had disappeared completely. Within 6 months, her family understood that this loss of interest was actually an early sign of her body's preparation for a significant health transition that became apparent later. The medical explanation involves changes in brain chemistry that affect motivation and the ability to experience pleasure from previously rewarding activities. When the body begins redirecting energy toward essential survival functions, non-essential activities lose their appeal even when the person is still physically capable of performing them. This process happens gradually, but becomes noticeable when interests that have been consistent for years suddenly disappear without explanation. Accepting activity withdrawal as normal aging can lead to missed opportunities for interventions that maintain quality of life and emotional well-being during remaining time. Gently encourage participation in modified versions of favorite activities and take careful note when interests completely disappear rather than just becoming more difficult. Contact their healthcare provider when lifelong interests suddenly vanish to rule out underlying medical causes that might be addressed. Behavioral shift 3. Increased dependency and help-seeking. When independent people suddenly start asking for help with tasks they've managed alone for decades, listen carefully to what their behavior is communicating about internal changes they may not consciously recognize. Harvard Medical School research indicates that rapid increases in dependency often signal declining cognitive or physical function months before obvious symptoms appear, as the subconscious mind recognizes limitations before the conscious mind accepts them. This isn't the gradual adjustment to aging that involves asking for help with increasingly difficult tasks, but rather sudden requests for assistance with activities they've handled independently without difficulty for years. The pattern involves seeking help with tasks that should still be within their capabilities, often accompanied by vague explanations about why they need assistance. They might ask family members to handle banking they've managed independently, request help with cooking they've done confidently, or suddenly seem overwhelmed by household tasks that were previously routine. The requests often come with explanations that don't fully make sense, such as claiming they're too busy or tired when their schedule hasn't changed significantly. This represents the subconscious recognition that their capabilities are declining even when they can't articulate exactly what has changed. William from Illinois began asking his daughter to handle his banking and bill paying after managing finances independently for 40 years as a successful accountant. He couldn't explain exactly why he needed help, just that it felt overwhelming and confusing in ways it never had before. Medical evaluation later revealed early cognitive changes that weren't yet obvious in normal conversation, but were affecting his ability to process complex information confidently. Medical professionals explain that increased dependency often reflects the brain's early recognition of declining function in areas like executive planning, complex problem-solving, or physical coordination that aren't immediately obvious to outside observers. The person may sense that tasks feel more difficult or confusing without being able to identify specific problems, leading to requests for help as a safety mechanism. Their subconscious mind may be protecting them from potential mistakes or failures by seeking assistance before problems become apparent. Dismissing increased dependency as laziness or attention-seeking can prevent early detection of serious underlying conditions that might benefit from intervention. Assess specifically what tasks they're struggling with and arrange professional evaluation of their cognitive and physical capabilities, rather than simply providing the requested help. Document what they can no longer do independently and seek medical guidance immediately to understand whether these changes indicate treatable conditions. Behavioral shift 4. Changes in communication patterns. Have their conversations become shorter, less detailed, or increasingly focused on negative topics they never dwelled on before? Cleveland Clinic neurologists report that changes in communication style and content often indicate brain changes or psychological preparation for end of life, as cognitive resources become more limited and priorities shift toward essential concerns. This involves alterations in both how they communicate and what they choose to discuss, often becoming less engaged in everyday conversation while showing increased interest in deeper or more serious topics. The changes reflect both cognitive changes affecting communication ability and psychological changes affecting what feels important to discuss. Normal conversation patterns that have been consistent for years may suddenly change in noticeable ways. They might give shorter responses to questions that previously prompted detailed discussions, show less interest in family news or current events that always engage them, or become fixated on topics like death, illness, or past regrets that weren't previous conversation focuses. Phone calls that once lasted an hour might become brief exchanges, and they may seem distracted or disengaged during conversations that should interest them. These changes often puzzle family members who can't understand why someone who was always chatty has become quiet and withdrawn. Helen from Michigan went from enjoying long, detailed phone calls with her sister to giving brief, distracted responses within just a few months. Conversations that used to cover family news, current events, and shared memories became perfunctory exchanges where Helen seemed eager to end the call. Her communication changes were actually early indicators of cognitive and emotional shifts that became more apparent over the following months. The medical basis for communication changes involves multiple factors working together. Cognitive changes affecting the ability to process and respond to complex information, physical changes affecting energy levels needed for extended conversation, and psychological changes affecting what topics feel important or worthwhile to discuss. When brain function begins declining, maintaining normal conversation patterns requires more effort and energy, making interactions feel exhausting rather than enjoyable. The person may also be unconsciously beginning the psychological process of disengaging from worldly concerns and relationships. Ignoring communication changes means missing opportunities for important final conversations and meaningful connection during a critical time. Encourage open dialogue about their concerns and feelings, asking gentle questions about topics they bring up repeatedly, and document significant changes in their speaking patterns, conversation length, and topic preferences. Start having deeper conversations now about what's important to them, their memories, and their feelings, because their words are telling you something important about their inner experience. Behavioral shift 5. Altered relationship with time and future planning. When someone stops making future plans or talks as if time is running out, they may be sensing something about their mortality that isn't yet obvious to medical evaluation or family observation. Palliative care specialists report that changes in future-oriented thinking and planning often occur 6 to 8 months before significant health decline, as the subconscious mind begins recognizing that remaining time may be limited. This isn't depression or pessimism, but rather an intuitive understanding of their body's condition that manifests through altered perspectives on time and planning. The changes often surprise family members because they seem unrelated to the person's apparent physical health or medical diagnoses. The behavioral changes involve canceling future commitments they would normally keep, avoiding making plans beyond the immediate future, or expressing reluctance to invest time or energy in projects that won't be completed quickly. They might stop renewing subscriptions, cancel travel plans they were excited about, or avoid making appointments far in advance. Conversations about future events become uncomfortable or dismissed, and they may express sentiments about not being around for holidays or family events without specific medical reasons for concern. These changes reflect an internal awareness that their remaining time may be shorter than external appearances suggest. Charles from Oregon cancelled his annual fishing trip reservation that he'd maintained for 15 years and stopped discussing holiday plans with family, saying they'd see what happens. His health seemed stable to family members, but his changed relationship with future planning reflected an internal awareness of approaching mortality that became apparent several months later. He had unconsciously begun organizing his remaining time around more immediate priorities rather than distant plans. Medical professionals recognize that many people experience intuitive awareness of approaching death months before clinical signs become apparent, possibly due to subtle physiological changes that aren't yet detectable through standard medical evaluation. The body may be sending internal signals about declining function that reach consciousness as altered perspectives on time and planning. This represents the beginning of psychological preparation for death, which often occurs well before physical symptoms become obvious to others. The person may begin focusing on immediate relationships and experiences rather than future-oriented activities and commitments. Missing these temporal changes can prevent families from having important discussions about wishes, preferences, and end-of-life planning while the person is still fully capable of meaningful participation. Ask gentle questions about their future hopes and concerns, taking their timeline perspectives seriously rather than dismissing them as negativity or depression. Pay attention to what future plans they abandon or avoid making, and consider these changes as potentially meaningful indicators of their internal awareness. Listen carefully to how they talk about tomorrow, next month, and next year, because their relationship with time reveals more about their condition than you might realize. Understanding these 5 behavioral shifts gives you the power to recognize critical changes before they become irreversible, allowing for better medical care, meaningful conversations, and precious time together. While these patterns are statistically significant indicators, early recognition can lead to interventions that improve both quality and potentially quantity of remaining life. Many families who learn to identify these changes report feeling more prepared, more connected, and more at peace with the natural progression of life when they understand what their loved one is experiencing internally. If you've witnessed any of these behavioral shifts in a loved one, please share your experience in the comments, because your story could help other families recognize these crucial warning signs before it's too late. Like this video if you found this information valuable for your family's future planning. and share it with relatives who should understand these important behavioral changes that could make all the difference in how you approach your loved one's care and remaining time together.